Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we didn't hear from the Minister in his contribution was how they're going in respect of their promises at the last election. One of their promises was 170,000 more jobs. They have fallen off that target. It is already clear that they're not going to make that promise that they made at the last election or anything like it, and as a consequence the Minister did not address it. We haven't heard anything of that promise. One of their shiny promises that they used to get to the election was say goodbye to higher taxes, not your loved ones. Since then, 200,000 New Zealanders have left permanently for Australia. 200,000! Much more than the combined population of Dunedin and Invercargill, much more than the population of Hamilton, much more than the population, the entire population of Napier Hastings combined. We didn't hear anything of that. We did hear reference to growth rates. They made reference to the growth rate. They ignored the fact that our two largest trading partners, Australia and China, have had a higher growth rate than New Zealand. They ignored the fact that the latest OECD report made for salutary reading. The OECD survey records that New Zealand's imbalances remain high, and it lists some of them in the report, and the budget that the Minister has just referred to doesn't fix them. For a start, it said that New Zealand has high levels of external liabilities, and they record, and they don't put it in these terms, but they record that the imbalances in the New Zealand economy, where we do not meet the cost of our imports and interest from the value of our exports, is already bad. It shows up in New Zealand's net international liabilities, which are just about all on the private ledger, are amongst the highest in the developed world, and that every year to the end of the forecast period, whether it's the OECD or the IMF, they remain amongst the highest, if not the highest, in the developed world. The IMF says our external deficit is the highest in the developed world. The OECD says it's second highest after Turkey. Mr. Speaker, the OECD then also says that the consequences of the underperformance of the New Zealand economy and our two-speed economy are not visited upon New Zealand evenly. They record that we have become an unequal country and that under this government it has got worse. Well, we shouldn't be surprised by that, because 40% of the income tax cuts that the National Party brought forward after coming into office went to the top 10% of the population. The OECD report that I've got in front of me, which is a June report, it's this very month, the OECD Economic Survey of New Zealand, June 2013, records that New Zealand's tax system is not, it's in the lower half of tax systems in terms of its redistributive effect. So it's less redistributive than other tax systems overall. And then they say that in particular, in respect of capital income, and it is income in an economic sense, but in terms of a tax definition, it's capital income, it is one of the least redistributive tax systems in the world, or in the OECD certainly. And I'm going to repeat something it says here. It says, tax changes meriting consideration are those which are more conducive to both growth and equity. And then it lists some. I quote from page 31 of their report, New Zealand belongs to a group of 5 OECD countries with particularly high pre-tax capital income inequality. As much of this income, especially at top levels, takes the form of capital gains, the lack of a capital gains tax in New Zealand exacerbates inequality by reducing the redistributive power of taxation. It also reinforces a bias towards speculative housing investments and undermines housing affordability. So, Mr. Speaker, the OECD is saying we are unequal, we are becoming more unequal, and in respect of this gaping hole in our tax system, we are amongst the most unequal in all of the developed OECD countries, and that we have this strange tax system that doesn't tax economic income, it taxes a subset of it, which is taxable income for the purposes of the Income Tax Act, and that excludes capital income. And they are saying that not only would New Zealand be a fairer place, our economy would be stronger if we remove that imbalance. Now, why would that be the case? Well, if we remove that imbalance, we then get New Zealanders investing their precious investment capital on the basis of the productivity of the investment or the profitability of the business that's being invested into, rather than a tax bias that currently favours speculative housing. Now, the ANZ in the last week have said, in respect of the latest data, that New Zealand has external imbalances which are worrisome and that are not fixed, and that they're effectively saying, well, again, they don't use these words, but they're effectively saying that another promise of the incoming national government, which was to rebalance the economy towards exports and export-related jobs, has not happened because their policies will not achieve it, and that as a consequence they should be getting a fail on that. Mr. Speaker, the second recommendation of the OECD was that we should have a tax system which uses environmental taxes to help enhance the quality of growth. And that phrase, help enhance the quality of growth, is a quote from the OECD. Such taxes could include congestion charges or taxing on polluting activities, or the removal of free permit allocation under the emissions trading scheme, which they go on to discuss. So they make two very helpful suggestions. They say if we want to have a stronger economy, then we should be doing things that this budget isn't doing, and that is that we should be moving not to increase taxes overall, but to change the mix of tax so that we remove some of the distortions in the economy, and we would, as a consequence, if that happened, be a wealthier nation with more jobs for our people, lower debt, and we would be a wealthier country over time. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party says that we should have a capital gains tax excluding the family home. That would improve the economy, it would improve the equity of society, and it would take some of the heat out of Auckland prices. Now, Auckland house prices. The Reserve Bank data that the Minister of Finance, or Mr. Joyce answering on behalf of the Minister of Finance today, didn't know about, and he admitted in question time that he didn't know about it, shows that we have increased by billions of dollars the additional household debt that is owed by New Zealanders secured over their homes. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance, or speaking on behalf of the Minister of Finance, Stephen Joyce, as Associate Minister of Finance, had a question on notice to himself put down today that said, what progress is the government making to ensure future generations of New Zealanders are not saddled with excessive debt? And so we in the opposition party, as it is our right at question time, asked him a supplementary question to that, and we asked the Minister what was the situation in respect of the extra debt that was being taken on by the household sector in their mortgages, because this was a question about New Zealanders being saddled with excessive debt. And the Minister said that he didn't know. He said that he didn't know, despite the fact that the Reserve Bank carries a data series that the Minister should have known, and I find it hard to believe that he didn't know, that shows that with Auckland house prices increasing at the rate of 15% per annum at the moment, we've got rampant house price inflation in this two-speed economy. The data series shows that already we've got over $180 billion of mortgage debt in New Zealand, and that it's increasing at a very fast rate. The Minister of the Associate Minister of Finance, Mr. Joyce, denied knowing that today in the House. We've just given a speech here in respect to this budget, and again he doesn't address this terrible misallocation of resource in New Zealand, where we've got rising house prices, we've got an export performance outside of the primary produce sector that is woeful, and the Minister again likes to dice his statistics and put his ever more reliance on primary production and the related manufacture, and deny the reality that we've had huge numbers, thousands of job losses in manufacturing outside of the manufacturing sector. We've had decreasing export receipts in real terms by 17% outside of that sector, that primary sector, and that the government's budget will not do anything to fix that problem.
Mr. Speaker, I call the honourable member